Welcome to Encroachment Sports Talk. We have had quite the event-filled week in the NFL that was potentially tragic and hopefully is not turning out to be so. And we wanted to offer our thoughts on, in light of the Damar Hamlin tragic situation, we wanted to offer our thoughts on how we think the NFL handled that situation. And then we'll get into some other stuff related to the playoffs going forward. So Chris, what are your thoughts on how the NFL handled that really sticky and potentially tragic situation?
Yeah, it was it was just so unique situation. I think we all watched it live, and first of all, you want to send out our wishes and hopefully a full recovery for Mr. Hamlin. But I thought it was tragic when it happened. When you saw the ambulance come out and those kind of things, it just I immediately went back to, have I ever seen anything like this before in football? And I think the only thing that came close that I could remember was when Darryl Stingley, I don't remember the receiver for the New England Patriots. He got hit by, and it was an exhibition game. He got hit by Jack Tatum, was obviously a big hitter, and he was paralyzed. And so that was probably when I was trying to compare in terms of severity and trauma, that was probably the closest one. So it was really kind of a unique situation. And frankly, I thought the NFL did a good job, really good job. And I'll tell you why. Because they had no protocols for this. There were no written protocols for this. There were no procedures. And I'm glad they suspended play and moved the game. I wish the game would have been played maybe later, but because there's a lot of other implications with that. You'll get into the playoff implications, those kind of things. But I don't think the Bills players and or the Bengals players were ready to continue that game. And from what I've heard, the NFL made the final call. Troy Vincent did, and there's some rumors that he wanted to maybe continue the game. But I think the right decision was made. The coaches, I think, agreed that that was the right decision. What are your thoughts on that, Mark? I think that was the right way to approach it.
Yeah, I think there's two aspects to this. One is the decision on whether they should play the game, and I think it was clear that they shouldn't. I think part of it is the optics, that it happened on national TV, and I don't want to downplay the seriousness of this situation, and I'm very thankful that Damar Hamlin seems to be on the mend. But let's say had that happened the day before in practice with no cameras on it, how would they have handled the situation? I think the game would have continued. So I think, I don't want to jump on people, but I think the optics of how it would play out had they continued the game plays a huge role in the decisions the NFL makes.
Oh, there's no question. We hear this all the time, and it's absolutely true, is protect the shield, right? They got to protect the brand. And so, it's a business. It's a very big business, a very lucrative business, the most lucrative in professional sports. So that obviously was a factor, but I think they made the right decision for, the humans involved, the teams themselves, and obviously Damar himself. So anyway, I think they got the right result, but you're right. I think it was uncharted waters for sure.
Yeah. So again, there's the decision to play or not to play. And given that they clearly made the right decision to postpone it, it just and I'm surprised the Bills just took it on themselves to fly back home that night, kind of, had they said, okay, let's play Tuesday, that I don't know how that would have worked, but then also playing Tuesday, there's games the next Saturday and Sunday, playing on a short week for such decisive games. There's other teams, depending on the Bills to win. We'll get into that later, but that's not necessarily fair. So calling the game was the right call. I wanted to touch on, given that, how did they make decisions with regards to playoff seeding and things? And when I first started to read what they did, I felt like, wow, these guys really understand probability. They're factoring in every situation and making it fair. And when I read into it in more detail, there's one team that clearly got screwed any way you look at it, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals. And what I say is there were two different probabilities of outcome for that game. And one was the Bills winning, which going into the game, they were favored by slightly. But given the situation at the time, down 7-3 with they had moved the ball just across the 50-yard line.
Right.
I would have guessed that at that point, the Bengals were favorites to win the game. So that was an even more likely scenario. But that's the other scenario, the Bengals winning. Now, the way they did it is they didn't count the game in the standings, and they made the decision that if anyone is within one half game of another team, we will make that sort of a coin flip or a neutral site with regards to home field advantage in the playoffs.
Right.
But what they neglected to realize is it's not just a half game. Had the Bengals beaten the Bills, that's a half game each way, which makes it a full game,
Yes.
which means the Bengals would have owned the number 2 seed.
Right.
And there is no talk in this, if they both win, the Bills and the Bengals, there's no neutral site or coin flip for home field in that second game.
Right. Yeah.
Now we'll get into our playoff predictions later, but do you choose the same team with the Bills home game if they're facing the Bengals versus a Bengals home game?
No.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's fair at all. I also look back at some precedent, and there's actually so this was a potential tragedy and certainly scarred some of the players, but it's even less of a tragedy than certain situations that happened in 2012, where I don't know if you remember, but a player from the Kansas City Chiefs, Jovan Belcher, actually committed murder of, I think, his girlfriend or wife, drove to the team facility and killed himself at the team facility the day before a game. That game was not canceled. That game went on. Same year, the next week, literally, Jerry Brown, a defensive back for the Cowboys, was killed in a car crash the night before a game, and that game went on.
Yeah.
So I say that to say the Bengals really took the high road at the time, saying, yeah, let's not play this game. It's too traumatic. Let's not worry about it. And then they're the teams who sacrificed the most, and the team was getting screwed the most, because I think it really impacts their ability to come out of the AFC.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So, and the difference between those two situations that you mentioned, the one that happened, right? It was on the field.
Exactly.
On TV. I mean, so that's the distinction, right? So, but I agree with you. I mean, those other two events were just as, they were tragic. I mean, you can't compare tragedies per se, but they were certainly handled differently. So. Yeah,
the scenario that I heard bandied about a little bit that I think would have been an opportunity. It would have been really exciting for the NFL. It wouldn't have solved the problem I talked about with the second and third seed, but had they, the Chiefs also come out like roses, they get the bye if they beat the Raiders at home, which is, I would think,
highly probable. Yeah, they're playing by the way, they're playing in Las Vegas. So.
Oh, okay. They're playing in Las Vegas, so a little bit tougher, but but Las Vegas is probably not a huge home field advantage with it being Las Vegas. Right. But had they added an 8th team in the AFC and not had a bye, they would be saying, okay, we're not really giving an advantage to the first seed other than potential home field advantage or neutral site. So they're really downplaying that advantage. Right. And then secondly, imagine what that would do to New York Jets fans who were eliminated, who now have a chance with the win over Miami and a Patriots loss. And the Pittsburgh Steelers fans, I think they would be in it as well. Right. So that would have been an opportunity to just add this extra team, take away the unfair advantage that the Kansas City Chiefs got. Anyway, but they missed that opportunity. And I think you're actually on a good track there, because I think at some point they're going to move to 8 teams in, frankly, and they're probably going to give the first 2 teams in each conference a bye. Well, if they had 8 teams, there would be no byes.
Well, but you could do the first 2 would be on a bye. And
just really extend the playoffs and have football end in March or something.
Yeah. Move it into March Madness.
It's the whole thing with the NFL trying to extend it year round,
Yeah, well, we're on 17 games now, right? So
yeah. So they could expand rosters to 75 players. It's just a war nutrition, right?
The never-ending NFL.
The Dolphins would be down to their 6th-string quarterback by that. They'd be calling up Dan Marino.
Yeah, that's right. Well, he can probably still play. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, maybe as well as our 7th-round pick.